folks, we are on just the cusp of what technology is going to do in the educational market in the decades to come. And it's very, very exciting. So our goal at Huawei is to really start to facilitate that dialogue. Facilitate that dialogue between a $35 billion manufacturer and the marketplace, which is y'all. So again, our goal is not to just tout how our products are great. Our goal is to facilitate an idea, to facilitate dialogue. How we, as a manufacturer, can come into your schools, into the education process, and really enable education, really enable the teachers, really enable the administrators. So that's what today is about. That's what our goal was when we put this together. This is the first of what we plan to be many. And we hope that this will become a better and better technology summit for y'all. I have the privilege of introducing our first speaker, John Halpin. John is an incredible guy. He has taught, as he has told me, he followed his students along their educational path. So he started out in the elementary, taught in the middle school, taught in the high school, and then went on to be a professor. He's also moved from that into technology, into telecommunication. And in technology and telecommunication, he moved from there into consulting. And we are very, very honored to have him here and to share with us. So John, if you would come up, we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, he didn't go into all the details, but maybe some of it has to do with my ADD. I've got to be constantly doing something new at all times, so I've had a very eclectic career. What I wanted to talk to you about today is the excitement that's going on today in education. You, I'm sure, are aware of it, but we are just at as he mentioned, a cusp of where it's going to be. Let me just start my slides here a little bit. We are in the beginning of a century change in education. What that means is that we all saw a Little House on the Prairie, right? So the one-room schoolhouse. That was an agrarian society. School had to reflect what kids had to learn, what was expected of them in an agrarian society. They had to read, write, do arithmetic. They had to balance the books. Okay? They had to learn something about the technology of the day. Well, the technology of the day was all about the farm equipment. Okay? School technology was what? Chalk and slate, right? A few books, not very many. They had to share them. What was the educational setting then? Educational setting was multi-aged, right? Lots of kids went to the schoolroom. Oh, maybe there was a larger school and they had 2 rooms. They could split them in half. But it was everybody had pretty much a shared environment. What kind of education was it? It was individual education, right? Each student progressed at his or her own rate because they came in at different times. They only had a certain amount of time to be there because they had chores to do on the farm. Okay, let's move forward to the 1900s. What happened then? Society changed. We became an industrial society. The kids were moving in from the farms into the cities. We had a tremendous immigration routing into our cities to work in those factories. What did education have to do? It had to respond. What did that mean? Well, they had to learn the new technology. They had to learn the new mores of that society. What did that mean? Had to be at work on time. You had to do your own work. You had to be responsible for your own work. You were graded or assessed based upon the job to be done. And we had what kind of resources to work with? Well, we had a few more books. Not too much in the way of what we today would call technology, but we had, by the 30s and 40s, we started to have things called film strips. By the 50s and 60s, we had things like 16 millimeter film, okay, phonographs. By the 80s, we had VCR, okay. That was technology. We're at the 2000s. Oh, by the way, How were classes delivered? And I love that picture. We all probably went to those kinds of schools, right? Rows, columns, everybody did the same thing at the same time. Cohort learning. This is the day we do X. The kids that were really fast probably already knew it. The kids that were a little slower probably never did it. But we graded them, we moved on. In this model, how many kids, what percentage of kids went on to college? Anybody know? As of 1960, the number, 39%. 39% of kids who went to this type of school district or schools graduated and went on to college. Graduated from college. What was it in 2010? Anybody know what the number was? 2010? 39%. What's that thing about idiocy? You do the same thing over and over again, expect different do it the same way and expect different results? Okay, well, that isn't going to work today. We don't have the kind of job for the future for the kids today that those kids that didn't make it through cohort could do, 40, 50 years ago. We have more and more education-oriented jobs. We're in an information age coming up. Everybody's going to need to know how to do things more effectively. They're going to need to know something about technology. They're going to need to know something about how to do math properly. They're going to have to be innovative. They're going to have to be creative. They're going to have to be adaptive. Because why? Because jobs are going to constantly change. Careers are going to constantly change. Got more and more people like me going down the road because that's what society is going to create. So what do we have in the way of technology for today's kids? Whew! All kinds of technologies. In the decade of in the 1900s, the teacher had to be the font of knowledge because the resources weren't available to be spread out across the board. So we had a cohort-style delivery system where the teacher spouted out the information. You jot it all down because it's important stuff. Okay, and I'm going to test you on it later. Today, information is everywhere. Now, it's got to be vetted, but it's everywhere. It's cheap. It's easily available. What's expensive today? People. So let's take a look at our model and do things more effectively. Let's use the resources of an intelligent, well-educated teacher to do the intelligent, well-educated things that they can do best and free them up from doing more menial things like taking attendance and filling out report cards and things like that just drive most teachers nuts because they want to work with kids. They want to see those lights light up in their eyes, right? So what can we do to be smarter going forward? That's where we are today. Okay. I like to take this first 3 decades of this century and break them up into what's been going on. First decade, from 2000 to 2010, it was kind of like technology, use it in the classroom if you can. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. It's an adjunct. If we got it, we'll use it. We'll use it to enhance. We'll do a little mediation with it. We'll do some enrichment with it. But by and large, it's not that important if you don't have it. Because we're still committed to our teacher-delivered cohort model. Okay? A curriculum that will be distributed to everybody, just like we've done for the last 100 years. I'll skip down to the bottom there. From 2020 to 2030, we look forward to the day where technology is infused into how we deliver education. That's not to say it's going to be an online education world. It is not going to be. But it's going to be a component of how we deliver education. Just like even in government today, which government's not really innovative, okay, in most cases, but even they have embraced technology to deliver their services. Okay, more and more you're doing things online instead of inline, right? Well, that's where we're going to be using technology greater where it makes sense in education going forward. That brings us to today, 2010, 2020. This is the ugly decade. It's messy. There are very few standards for us to hang our hat on. Very few best practices. We're still figuring out how to fund all the stuff we want to do. Content is still being created or being adapted or finding new delivery systems. Our classrooms need to be totally renovated to adapt to this new learning style. Teachers need to learn how to teach differently. Administrators need to administer differently. The old assessment systems don't quite work real well. We have to have a little more tolerance about how things go. And of course, we can take it all the way up the ladder and talk in terms about state assessment and all that sort of thing. But the idea is this is an ugly decade. We're going to get ourselves through it. It's going to take a few more years. There's light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a train. We're going to get there. But this is the decade we're going to be feeling a lot of pain. Job descriptions will change. But everything up and down. The calendar is probably going to change. Okay, the workday is going to change. How we count credits will probably change. I mean, everything is in the same flux right now. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we know it's going to be different than it is today. So that's what we're looking for. So all this is transforming pedagogy to meet today's requirements. So we have things like fully online courses, virtual courses, virtual schools. You have one here in Texas. Some states have been doing it for quite a while. Florida, for instance, their Florida virtual school has been on for quite a while. Interesting. It jumped up really fast, did really well for a few years. Last year, it started dropping off with enrollment, started dropping off with, and the reason for it was because the school districts were adopting some of those best practices and doing it in-house. And what would be their motivation to do that? Any economists in the group? The money. Okay, if you keep those kids in-house, you get to keep their headcount money. So that was one of the reasons for it. But it's creating innovation. And we're starting to see more and more of a blended environment, which is the next step up here. Blended learning. Learning what technology does best and what people do best, what teachers and cohorts do best together. And that blended learning, I think, is going to be, in some form or another, going to be the answer down the road. It's not going to be an online world with few exceptions. And it's not going to be a face-to-face world with few exceptions. It's going to be some kind of a blended world where online resources do what I like to call data dumping, okay, the information dump. You know, in history class, it was all those dates and so forth. You can do that on your own. You can do that online. But what you need help with is how to synthesize that information, how to do something with it, how to make connections, how to talk to somebody about it, how to be creative with that information, how to make sense of it all. That's where the human interaction is going to come in. And I think that's where the future is going to be. That's my humble opinion. What's going on in class? We're going to personalize education, not just individualize it, because what does individualize mean? It means to do the same thing the whole cohort was going to do, but you're going to do it by yourself. Personalizing it is a little different. Personalizing is, I have a concept I need to get across to you, but I'm going to put that concept across in a way that you can grasp it best. If you, for instance, are taking an algebra class, and, we all have had those, the train leaves Chicago and all that sort of thing and meets, and where's it going to meet, and at what speed and all that sort of thing. Well, why does every kid have to take use that same example to get the same concept across of two variables? Why doesn't the engineering kid, the kid who was interested in a career in engineering, get an engineering-oriented example? Why doesn't a nursing kid get a nursing example? That's meaningful to them, right? It's a piece of cake in this world of technology. The concept is the same, the example changes to personalize to the kid. Now that's just one meager example, but you get an idea of what I'm talking about. If a kid is a better visual learner, provide more visual stimulus opportunities. If a kid is an audio learner, address him that way. So that's what we're figuring out as we're moving through this direction here. So policy and legislation. Some of this is positive and some of this is dragging us behind, right? We can only do what we're allowed to do, especially in public education. So let's start off with the Fed. Even though the federal government only provides about 10% of public K-12 education funding. It's that 10% that kind of drives the districts. And the reason for that is because that's the extra money that they can do the extra stuff with. The 90% that's developed either locally or through state funds usually is the mandatory stuff. You know, they're keeping the buildings open, paying the teachers, and so forth. It's that extra 10% that allows you to do the kind of the sexy stuff, the stuff that you really want to get done. It provides some of the technology funding. It provides some of the innovative grant funding. It provides some of the extra support necessary to support certain types of students. Okay, so that's why they drive a lot of that. The FCC, and of course you all know E-rate, there's a lot going on right now, even as I speak here in September, at the FCC, redefining and reassessing the E-rate program. The E-rate program was created in 1995, implemented in 96, and it had very strict rules related to it. Why? Because it wanted to spread the little bit of money that they had, at the time it was $2.5 billion, out to as many school districts in the United States as it could. And it based its rules based upon 1995 realities. Well, think about the internet, think about 1995. It was a whole different world. We hadn't had any denial of service attacks yet. We hadn't had to manage anything on our desktops. There was no such thing as SIPA at the time. There was none of that stuff existed. So they wrote rules in there. This is only for connectivity purposes, and it only attaches to telecommunications devices, not end-user devices. That was the rule that was put in place. And for about the first 2 years, it worked. And then we started having some problems, and they never addressed it. And they never adjusted the dollar figure either. Until very recently did a cost of living adjustment. It's up to about 2.3 at this point now. At this point. So they're thinking right now about putting more money into the program. The Obama administration has made some suggestions. They're out and getting information from the community right now to see what the inputs would be. So expect probably about another month and a half or 2 months the FCC to come out with a recommendation for a new revised program that will probably have more money and probably address a broader range of items, like, for instance, internet access for certain kinds of kids at home is one area that we're looking at, particularly in rural areas. The sequester, just know that it's coming. Who knows what it's going to mean? Whatever is going to be happening in the next couple of months. It will have a marginal effect on some of that federal money. Some of that federal money. So remember, 10%, less than 10%, probably about 10% of 10%. So we're looking at maybe 1% of the overall school budget could be affected by this. But the other part of it is no legislator wants to be accused of being against education, so they'll probably bend over backwards to support education. But I just want to let you be aware that that is out there. And of course, you all have different things going on locally in your own local school districts, as well as at the state level. And I have a slide later on talking about Texas in just a bit. Oops, wrong one. So what's the goal? The goal is personalized learning. As I mentioned before, it's to meet each child's needs. It's not about a kid passing a certain amount of seat time to move on to the next grade level to eventually graduate out. Whether or not they know anything or not, that's not the goal anymore. It's not about graduation. It's about personal learning. It's about achievement. And that's another thing we have to redo as far as our rules and regulations and laws is how do we define a graduate under this new scheme of things? Because under personalized learning, a student will stay on a topic or stay within a substance area for a period of time until they have reached achievement. It's not about A, B, C, D and move on. It's about, in effect, a certificate. I've passed, I understand this concept. Now I can move on to the next concept. So schools have to figure out what that means. Higher education has to figure out what to do with these kinds of kids as well. That's the other piece of the puzzle that we're still working on. I mean, again, messy decade. This is a messy decade. Clark County School District it's the Las Vegas, Nevada School District. About 2 years ago, they passed a policy that said that their students would graduate when ready, and when ready, graduate. So means in the next year or two, they're going to start graduating kids that could be maybe 16 years old. But they have passed, because of personalized learning and all the online learning opportunities and so forth, year-round schooling, et cetera, they could be finished with their high school courses by 16. On the other side of the story, there are kids that may be 17, 18 years old that chronologically should be graduating, but haven't achieved the right level of achievement. So they're going to keep them another year or so with a more personalized learning program for them. That's an innovative concept. They've got, because it's by far the largest school district in the state of Nevada, they've been able to push the state legislature to allow that to happen. So therefore, that's the first state we really see that as an ongoing program. So that could be something we might look at down the road as a possibility. And the other idea is that every child has a high-stakes assessment. And I don't mean for the purposes of the state. I mean for the purposes of that child's achievement level. And employers down the road are going to be looking, what does this kid actually know? Not only at the K-12 level, but also in higher education. Much more so in the way of understanding what their portfolio of education is about. Not just what their resume say, oh, got a good degree in X. What does that mean? You've hired people. What does that mean to you? Okay, what do they know? Okay, they got a degree. 15 years ago, they got a degree in psychology. Okay, I want to hire them for a job that has nothing to do with psychology. How do I adapt that? We do a lot of surveys at the Center for Digital Education. I thought I'd give you a couple of some results here. 48% of students want more digital content in their classes. This is a survey of students, parents, and educators. 65% of school districts currently have a digital content strategy, and 28% are developing one. So you can see that pretty much everybody's on board with figuring out what to do with this digital education. By the way, textbooks are relics. The ones you have that in your classrooms today, hold on to them. There'll be museum pieces in a few years. So just be aware of that. By the time we hit 2030, there will be no such thing as textbooks. The ones that are still out there will probably be, unusable unless there's a classroom set that just sits in the back of the room somewhere. 64% of K-12 students use digital content in the classroom itself. 67% of school districts have data dashboards, and another 18% are in the process of doing that. Again, this supports that personalized learning. What does a kid know today? What should he or she do today to move the ball forward? I don't have to wait to the end of the week for my quiz, at the end of the month for the test. I should know what's going on. That dashboard should pop up right away and say, okay, Johnny didn't look at his online assignment last night, because we trapped that data. He didn't access it. So therefore, that's something to ask Johnny about. What happened last night, Johnny? Rather than wait for a week to find out that he's behind. Okay? You guys all tell us that expect your data to grow exponentially in the next few years. And I think even that might be, 40% might be even a little low. As we start seeing more and more productivity, more creativity coming from students that are going to be stored in your systems. 93% of districts have at least one online course approved for credit. Some states it's mandatory. Some states have multiple courses mandatory online before graduation. 6% of students bring a personal device to class and use the campus network. 60%. 83% of faculty do the same. And more than 50% of districts incorporate mobile devices into their curriculum. And that number is going to grow exponentially as we start dealing more and more with well, you have your own version of Common Core here in Texas, but the rest of the states are dealing with some version of Common Core that requires that the Common Core courses be delivered through some kind of personalized device. Impact in the classroom. We're going to have to come up with some new learning modes. And that doesn't mean technology-driven for technology-driven purposes. That means if I'm teaching a 7th grade science class, What is the best technique I can use to get a particular concept across? What technologies can I use? How much of it can I have the kid do online as homework? A flipped classroom environment, right? They do the data dump at home, and when they come back to school, we actually do the exercise. Instead of the more traditional way, you teach in class and they go home and then parents don't know how to help with the homework, right? Flip it around the other way. That's a great way to do that. But what does it mean? Teachers have to learn how to teach that way. None of them have learned that in education school. Absolutely none have. So it's up to the districts to do all that work. They're going to turn to technologists in the school district. They're going to turn to their curriculum people. They're going to turn to all kinds of folks to help them with that process. Schools are transforming. Course delivery, as I mentioned, is transforming. School structures are going to start transforming. Okay, we talked about a calendar, 180-day calendars. That was great for an agrarian society, wasn't it? It even kind of worked in an industrial society, although we stretched it out a little bit more. Put more vacations in the middle, so we had a shorter summertime. In today's day and age, no. What is a calendar? How about days of the week? How about hours of the day? Why does it have to be between 8 and 3:30 or 4 o'clock or whatever it might be, right? More flexible scheduling can accommodate better use of facilities. And oh, by the way, what do those facilities need to look like? Do we still need to build those 25-foot by 30-foot boxes? Okay, that classrooms have traditionally been since the industrial age began. Why shouldn't they look more, since we have personalized learning and small group discussion group, why doesn't it look like today's office building, right? Where you have all the cubicles, then you have meeting rooms, small meeting rooms. Maybe that becomes part of a new model. Okay, there are 14,000 school districts. There's going to be 14,000 answers, at least for the short term, until we figure out what makes the most sense. Alternative settings we've talked about. Innovative certificates. As I mentioned before, as we accomplish a particular task, let's give credit for it and move on. Instead of waiting to the end of the course and you get an A, B, C, D. What kind of resources are we going to look at? We're going to need to have here's where you guys come in, a robust network and IT infrastructure to support all this stuff. And it's going to be fluid. And it's going to require a lot of expertise on your part. Because what happens in a classroom when you rely upon something as a teacher, and I was one, and it didn't work? You've got 30 or 25, whatever that number of kids that you've got to accommodate for the next 45 minutes, and you don't have anything to work with. You're not going to like that day, and it better not happen again, because there's going to be all hell to pay. Okay, so that's another important aspect that you've got to take into consideration. As we become more and more tethered to delivering through a technology world, the infrastructure has to be resilient, available, and that means probably you've got to be thinking in terms of some sense of redundancy. Okay, just like the rest of the world does with their technology. Okay, the rest of the world that relies upon technology has to think in those terms as well. They got to be thinking what kind of pipes they got coming in, how they're going to support it, what backup systems do they have, they keep their data restored and so forth. So schools are going to have to start thinking along those lines as well. Because as we rely more and more on how to deliver through technology, that technology has to be as foolproof as possible. I already mentioned this before, the teacher, the instructor, has to evolve. They have to learn all kinds of new techniques. It's not about how to use technology. It's how to use a technology effectively for their subject area, for their students, and how to use various technologies to hit particular units of study most effectively. And then the classroom expectations. What is a classroom in the new world? Is it a physical space? Is it a time space? Is it a function? Virtual, blended, that all kind of blurs those lines. Okay, so what does a school district have to do? Well, they've got to prepare for this transformation. We all know they have to build an infrastructure to support it. They've got to come up with all the technology components behind the infrastructure, the devices for kids, the devices for students, the software to do all that analysis. They've got to come up with the digital content, the curriculum that's going to be necessary that adapts most effectively for the personalization of that learning. And the support, the professional development that's necessary, the technology training and support that's necessary. So what are some of those tools? Well, some of you have already talked about over breakfast and so forth, talking about developing a one-to-one initiative in your school district. Every kid gets a device that's delivered by the school district, either while they're in the classroom or some of them have actually started to bring them outside the classroom. They can take them home with them. Most of the country we see that's an active thing that people are striving for. They're not going to get there for a short period of time at least, because the economics of how budgets are put together can't come up with enough money today. So what most of them are doing is developing a BYOD or BYOT, depending on how you want to look at it, policy, where they're those kids who can bring their own, and we subsidize the rest with some kind of one-to-one school device. We're going to have to live probably with that model for this decade until it comes out, until we figure out how to redo our budgets differently and take that textbook money and repurpose it for other purposes. Classroom management tools. Whoa! When the teacher's no longer in the front of the room delivering all that content and has an eyeball on every kid and they're all lined up just right and you can keep an eye on them all the time, it was relatively easy to manage the classroom, at least from a behavioral perspective. If you're a good teacher, you can kind of see the lights in the eyes and those eyes that don't light up, and you can figure out who's getting it, who's not getting it. When you digitize content, you then can trap every metric available. You don't have to do guesswork anymore. It's not an analog world anymore. It's not an observation world. It is a metricized world. And so those dashboards become increasingly more important for just-in-time learning. What do we need to do next? Who's starting to slip behind? Let's capture them before they require remediation. Let's jump on top of it early on and find, hey, this particular style or this particular lesson plan is not working for this kid. Let's intervene right away and find an alternative way to deliver that for that kid. So those are some of the things we're looking at. We're looking at integrating our LMS and other kinds of content management systems. A lot of districts are moving away from a set textbook or even a textbook delivered online methodology. They're looking for more disaggregated content from various places and creating their own units, reaching the new standards. Okay, so we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on. And I would expect more and more states like Texas to follow that guideline as well, as from a state level. Vetted curricula, yeah. We don't have enough content anymore like it was 50 years ago. The problem now is there's too much content. Let's get the good stuff. Okay, so how do we direct kids to the good stuff? How do we help them learn how to use good stuff and not bad stuff? Professional development, I mentioned that before, as well as bandwidth. If you think you got enough bandwidth, you don't. Just rule of thumb. It's going to grow exponentially as more and more classrooms adopt the use of technology to deliver education. Because it's not just a consumption mode. Okay? It's going to be a creation mode. So all those kids are not just going to consume, they're going to create and send out for each other's, their peers, and so forth. So that's another part of the whole process. So what are some of the barriers to success? Budgeting and funding, always put that at the top of the list. It's always an issue. Security and academic integrity. Okay, I heard some of you talk about securing your data and VPNing and all that sort of thing. Absolutely. That's going to not diminish, it's going to increase, particularly in a BYOD world. Particularly in a tablet-oriented BYOD world, where they're not Windows-based tablets out there. Yes, there are Windows-based tablets, but that's not the majority out there. What's it going to be like in a Chrome world, Android world, iOS world? How are you going to address that as those BYOD kids come in with those kinds of devices and they want to have access to the content that's in your classrooms? Seat time versus competency. I think I've mentioned that before. That's got to be handled at the legislative level. Leadership and teacher buy-in. Okay, we all know those teachers who, I've been doing this for 30 years and been very successful. Why should I change from my last 10 years? Okay, there are going to be some of those folks. By the way, the kids, the 20-somethings just out of teaching college, you would think, boy, they're going to be great with this stuff. They're going to know how to teach with technology. They're going to be great. That isn't the case. The most innovative teachers are the ones that have got 7 or 8 years under their belts. The ones fresh out of school really understand how to use technology. They don't know how to teach with technology very well at all. In fact, they're very reticent to do that because they're not being taught that in their teacher education schools. And so what do teachers do? I'm a teacher. There are probably some people in here who have been teachers. You mimic those people that were teachers that you admired. You followed their techniques and processes. And that's what you've adopted as your own until you've learned your own and feel comfortable moving off in your own world. And that's why the 7, 8, 9-year tenured teacher tends to be the more innovative. They've got enough behind them at this point that they're feeling pretty good about themselves and they're willing to take that step forward. And they know why they're taking that step forward. And then, of course, leadership. Your district leaders have to endorse and support these efforts because there are going to be missteps along the way. There have to be. There are no proven best practices at this point in time. There's got to be some leeway there for experimentation. So what's going on here in Texas? You guys got a lot of stuff going on. You've got your own version of Common Core. You were the head of the rest of the United States in that regard. Your science curriculum is supported by 92 online products that you can pick and choose from. You've got a literacy assessment for 8th graders that'll be coming out in the next, I think, couple of months. Your time program provides single source for teachers to vet their content. And your Educate Texas offers public and private pilots so that the private sector can support a pilot, and then if they partner with a public sector entity, then they can then launch that pilot with some seed money. So you're doing a lot of very innovative things. You're ahead of the curve for the other 49 from where I stand. So what's in the future? Well, we expect to see more and more targeted education technologies. There are over 800 education-specific companies today. 800 that are focused in education, most of them in K-12. Because why? There's so much opportunity there. It's a huge market. It's about a $20 billion market just in the United States. And what works here will work any place in the English-speaking world at least. And Australia is jumping on the things that we're doing here, as well as England's been doing some good things for a while, but they're also looking to see what's going on here in the United States, and of course Canada as well, and South Africa in particular. We're learning about new teaching methodologies, and of course developing more personalized learning experiences. What does that mean? Things like using students in smaller groups to teach each other, kind of a mini cohort, but it's student-led as opposed to teacher-led. It's functionally based. It's hands-on learning. It's doing by example. Interactive learning, big, 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 big. Okay, I've got examples here of 3D printing. More and more creativity is happening with kids actually not just doing a math assignment or a science assignment, but actually creating something out of it or coming up with the parts that are necessary to actually do their own experiment. Really creative stuff. And that price point is dropping significantly for those kinds of technologies. Talk about learning playgrounds and studios. Okay, what I mean by that is for the elementary kids, learning should be fun. Learning should be fun, and it can be fun. We see them play games all the time. And, it can be oriented towards an educational purpose or oriented just to, shoot guns or something, okay? So why don't we be more creative and address a kid where they are instead of where we wish them to be, and then bring them to where we want them to be. The whole idea of gaming, it's a great way to teach a kid how to learn. It's not about listening and memorizing. It's about finding out. It's about discovery. It's trial and error with a reward system at the end, with hints about how you did wrong and how you can fix it. Isn't that what we want kids that are in an innovative, ever-changing 21st century to do, is to learn how to learn by themselves? Okay? It's an extremely important component to it. Google Glass, a new technology, obviously just come out. So an instructor can have, there's an example there, you can actually have this and do something in the real world and have the students experience that literally through their eyes as they're talking over what they're doing and how they're seeing it. So it's just a different way of doing it, much more personalized. I've already talked about the more flexible calendar. Revised funding models, we're going to have to see that coming. Richer set of content, more shared resources, you know. I know this is going to sound a little odd here, but why should every single independent school district have their own bought and sold curriculum? Why don't you share some of that stuff, okay? It just kind of makes economic sense. But not only within your school, but look up to your community college level. What things can you guys do together better? You're better at the remediation, they're better at the acceleration. So isn't there more creativity going on between there? How do you get kids that have never been, their families have never been to college, how do you get those kids oriented towards, there's a possibility I can go there. What's it going to be like? How do I do that? How do I experience some of that while I'm still in high school? There are opportunities there that we might start seeing instead of these really hard and fast silos that we've had up until this point in time. And then the idea of innovation. We need to address and adopt innovation as much as we can. So as keys for success, it starts with leadership. At every level, it starts with leadership. At the school board level, at the superintendent level, at the department chair level, we need people who are willing to lead and willing to take some chances, but also willing to learn from those chances. One size will not fit all. I know that's not the way the industrial school model worked, but that's going to have to be the way that the personalized learning works. Kick the tires, try things out. Learn from those mistakes. Do it better next time. This is the ugly decade, remember. Nobody expects you to have it right. Well, I shouldn't say that. You shouldn't be expected to have it right. Go slow to go fast. Pilot before you implement full bore. Of course, I'm talking to a technology crowd. You guys know that anyway. But on the curriculum side, they don't often pick that idea up very well. And constant teacher-student communication to keep students on top of things. Well, we have the technologies in the digital world to do that. You know, instant communication out to students. We track all their information. We can do that even better than we ever did before. So key takeaways: they need a seamless infrastructure to make all this work. It's got to be simple. It's got to be transparent. They can't even think about, well, how do I log on to this and all that sort of thing. No. It's just got to be there for them. They need it, how they need it. Content has to be ready when they need it, how they need it. And teachers themselves have to be prepared to deliver in this world. So I don't know if we have time for questions, Tom? No, we don't. Okay, I'm sorry about that. If, however, you should ask me for any questions or want to follow up on that, this is my information at the Center for Digital Education, or centerdigitaled.com, and I'll be glad to respond. Thank you.
Very much. I'm on here. All right.